The wrench slipped from Roy's hand and clattered against the metal floor. He cursed under his breath and reached for it again, his fingers slick with hydraulic fluid. The environmental processor had been acting up for 3 days now, and nobody seemed to care enough to fix it properly. That was fine by him. Down here in the lower maintenance levels of the research station, he could work in peace without dealing with the usual chaos upstairs. The comm system crackled to life above his head. Roy ignored it at first. Station announcements were always about something mundane, like cafeteria schedule changes or safety drills that nobody took seriously. He wedged himself deeper into the access panel, trying to reach a stuck valve that controlled the air recycling system. Then he heard screaming. Roy froze. The comm system carried the sound of pure terror, followed by weapons fire, and something that sounded like metal being torn apart. A voice shouted orders in the high-pitched language of the Verith species, but it was cut off mid-sentence. More screaming followed. Then silenced, he pulled himself out of the access panel and stood up, wiping his hands on his work pants. The comm system burst back to life with a dozen overlapping voices, all panicked and shouting over each other. Roy caught fragments of words. Containment breach, Sector 7, casualties, evacuation. His fingers moved to his personal communicator. He tapped it twice. Nothing. The entire lower-level network was offline. That meant the automated systems had kicked in, sealing bulkheads to contain whatever was happening upstairs. Roy felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He had worked on space stations for 12 years, and he knew what automated lockdowns meant. Something very bad was loose up there. The lights flickered and switched to emergency red. Roy grabbed his tool bag and headed for the nearest access corridor. His boots echoed on the metal grating as he ran. The corridor stretched ahead of him, empty and silent except for the distant hum of life support systems. He reached the elevator shaft and pressed the call button. Nothing happened. Lockdown. Roy pulled out his maintenance override card and swiped it across the panel. The system beeped twice and denied access. He tried again. Same result. Whatever was happening, it was serious enough that even maintenance clearance had been revoked. He was trapped down here. The comm system spoke again, clearer this time. It was the station commander, a Krell named Vorthan. His voice carried the force calm of someone trying not to panic. All personnel evacuate to the emergency pods immediately. This is not a drill. 2 Class A predators have breached containment. Security teams unable to control. Repeat, evacuate immediately. Roy leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. Class A predators. That meant apex hunters from death worlds, creatures so dangerous they required maximum security protocols. And 2 of them were loose. He pulled up his wrist display and checked the station schematic. The lower levels were completely sealed off from the upper sections. There were only 3 ways out. The elevator, which was locked, the emergency stairwell, which would also be sealed, and the cargo transport tubes, which were too narrow for a human to fit through. He was stuck. Roy walked back to his work area and sat down on an equipment crate. His mind raced through options. He could wait here until security dealt with the problem. But based on what he had heard over the comm, security was not dealing with anything. They were dying. He could try to force open one of the sealed doors, but that would take hours with the tools he had available. Or he could stay put and hope the predators did not find a way down here. The decision was made for him when he heard something moving in the ventilation shaft above his head. It was not the usual clicking and humming of the environmental systems. This was something else. Something big, moving with purpose through the ductwork. Roy stood up slowly and backed toward his tool bag. The sound grew louder. Metal creaked and groaned under significant weight. Whatever it was heading directly toward his location. He grabbed a plasma cutter from his bag and powered it on. The tool was designed for cutting through hull plating, not for defense, but it was better than nothing. The ventilation grate 20 meters down the corridor exploded outward with a screech of tearing metal. A massive shape dropped to the floor and unfolded itself. Roy felt his breath catch in his throat. The creature stood nearly 3 meters tall on 4 powerful legs. Its body was covered in dark scales that reflected the red emergency lights like polished stone. A long head swiveled in his direction, and Roy saw rows of teeth designed for ripping and tearing. The eyes glowed with a predatory intelligence that made his skin crawl. This was the reptilian hunter from the containment files he had seen during safety training. A creature from a high-gravity world where only the strongest survived. Built to kill, the creature took a step toward him, then another. Its head lowered slightly as it analyzed this new potential prey. Roy held the plasma cutter steady, though his hands wanted to shake. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he knew running would trigger a chase response. Prey runs. Predators chase. That was basic biology to S.O. Roy did something the creature did not expect. He stood his ground and stared back. The reptilian stopped. Its head tilted slightly, confused. In its world, prey either fled or fought. This small soft thing was doing neither. It just stood there, holding a glowing tool and maintaining eye contact. The creature's tail swished once, uncertain. Then the lights went out completely. Eye in the darkness. Roy heard another sound. This one came from behind him, from a different access corridor. Soft, padding footsteps, almost silent against the metal floor. The second predator had found him too. Roy tightened his grip on the plasma cutter and smiled grimly. Growing up in the Australian outback, his grandfather had taught him something important. When you're cornered by something that wants to eat you, you have two choices. You can die like prey, or you can show them you're something else entirely. Emergency lights flickered back on, casting everything in blood-red shadows. Roy did not move. He kept his breathing steady and his stance relaxed, even though every muscle in his body screamed for action. The reptilian predator remained 10 meters ahead, its scales gleaming like dark glass. Behind him, the soft footsteps had stopped. Roy shifted his weight slightly and turned his head just enough to see what had joined the party. The second creature was completely different from the first. It resembled a large feline, but with 6 legs and fur that seemed to shimmer and change color to match the shadows around it. Its eyes were too large for its head, adapted for hunting in low light. Sharp spines ran along its back, and its tail ended in a cluster of barbed quills. This was the pack hunter from the toxic jungle world. Built for stealth and persistence, both predators watched Roy. Both waited for him to make the first move that prey always made. The panicked run, the desperate fight, the frozen terror. Roy gave them none of those things. Instead, he reached slowly into his tool bag without breaking eye contact with the reptilian. His fingers found what he was looking for, a maintenance scanner with a bright LED torch attachment. He pulled it out in one smooth motion and activated it. Brilliant white light flooded the corridor, aimed directly at the feline predator's oversized eyes. The creature shrieked and stumbled backward, blinded by the sudden glare. Its camouflage flickered wildly through a dozen colors as it tried to process the sensory overload. Roy swung the light toward the reptilian next. The creature hissed and raised one massive claw to shield its eyes. Taking an involuntary step back, Roy used that moment to move. Not away from the predators, but toward them. He walked forward with the confidence of something that owned this territory, not something trying to escape it. The plasma cutter hummed in one hand, the light blazed in the other. He aimed the beam between both creatures, keeping them separated and off balance. The reptilian lowered its claw and growled deep in its chest. It was a sound designed to paralyze prey with fear. Roy ignored it and kept walking. 3 meters separated them now, then 2. The creature's muscles tensed, preparing to strike. Roy stopped just outside its reach and slowly raised the plasma cutter. He triggered it once, sending a jet of superheated plasma into the wall beside the reptilian's head. Metal melted and dripped to the floor, glowing orange. The message was clear. "I can hurt you." The reptilian's eyes narrowed. It took a step back, then another. This was not how prey behaved. Prey did not challenge. Prey did not threaten. Something was wrong with this situation, and the creature's predator brain was trying to process information that did not fit its evolutionary programming. Roy heard movement behind him. The feline had recovered from the light blast and was circling around for a better angle. He could feel its eyes on his back, analyzing him for weaknesses. Roy turned slowly, keeping both predators in his peripheral vision. The feline froze when he faced it directly. He noticed something interesting then. The creature's spines were partially raised, a defensive posture. It was wary of him. Good. Fear could be useful. Roy deactivated the plasma cutter and clipped it to his belt. Both predators tensed, expecting an attack now that his weapon was lowered. Instead, Roy pulled out his wrist display and started tapping commands. The station's maintenance systems were still accessible from down here, even if the main network was locked down. He had authorization to control environmental settings in the lower levels. Within seconds, he had what he needed: Sector 7 schematic, predator profile files, and system control access. Roy studied the information while keeping his body language loose and unconcerned. Both creatures watched him with growing confusion. This prey was ignoring them to look at a glowing screen. It made no sense. According to the files, the reptilian was a thermal hunter. It detected heat signatures and vibrations through the ground. The feline tracked prey through electromagnetic fields and chemical sense. Both were intelligent enough to solve basic problems and adapt to new environments. But neither had ever encountered prey that understood how they hunted. Roy smiled. Time to teach them something new. He tapped another command on his wrist display. The temperature in the corridor began to drop rapidly. The cooling system pumped cold air through the vents, lowering the ambient heat by 10 degrees in 30 seconds. The reptilian shifted uncomfortably as its thermal vision became less effective. Everything was cooling down at the same rate, making it harder to distinguish individual heat sources. Next, Roy activated the electromagnetic pulse system used for equipment testing. A low-frequency pulse rippled through the corridor, just strong enough to interfere with the feline's electromagnetic sense. The creature shook its head and hissed in frustration as its primary hunting method was disrupted. Both predators were now operating at a disadvantage in an environment that had suddenly turned hostile to their natural abilities. And the small, soft prey thing in front of them had done it with a few taps on a screen. Roy walked backward toward a side corridor, moving slowly and deliberately. He kept the light aimed at floor level between himself and the predators, creating a barrier of brightness they would have to cross. Neither creature followed immediately. They were too busy trying to adapt to the sudden environmental changes. When Roy reached the corridor intersection, he stopped and looked back at them one more time. The reptilian had lowered itself closer to the ground, trying to pick up vibrations. The feline was testing the air with rapid breathing, relying more on scent now that its other senses were compromised. Roy tapped his wrist display again. The lights in the main corridor went dark, but the side corridor where he stood remained lit. He was giving them a choice: follow him into unknown territory, or stay in the dark, trying to hunt something that knew how to neutralize their advantages. The feline took a tentative step toward the light. The reptilian rumbled a warning, but did not attack. Both predators were starting to understand something that their instincts struggled to accept. They were not the apex hunters here. Not anymore. Roy turned and walked deeper into the lower levels, leaving the corridor behind. He heard claws clicking on metal as one of the creatures followed at a distance. Then heavier footsteps as the other joined. They were tracking him now, but not hunting. This was different. This was curiosity mixed with caution. Upstairs, the station security was still trying to kill these creatures with weapons and brute force. They saw monsters that needed to be destroyed. Roy saw something else entirely. He saw intelligent predators that could be understood, predicted, and controlled. His grandfather's words echoed in his memory. If you want to survive a predator, you need to think like one. The cargo bay stretched out like a metal cavern, filled with storage containers stacked 3 high. Roy moved between them with practiced ease, his footsteps echoing off the walls. Behind him, at varying distances, the 2 predators followed. They had been tracking him for 20 minutes now, maintaining a careful distance. The reptilian stayed back about 15 meters, using its size to intimidate. The feline moved closer, sometimes disappearing behind containers only to reappear from unexpected angles. Roy let them follow. He needed them both in the same location for what came next. His wrist display showed security camera feeds from the upper levels. What he saw was not encouraging. 3 more security teams had tried to corner the predators before they escaped to the lower levels. All 3 teams were dead. The station commander had sealed off entire sections and was threatening to vent the atmosphere if the creatures were not contained within the hour. That gave Roy 45 minutes to prove he had a better solution. He reached the center of the cargo bay and stopped beside a large environmental control panel. This was one of the main junction points for the lower-level systems. From here, he could control temperature, pressure, gravity, and atmospheric composition across 6 different sections. Roy opened the panel and began making adjustments. The reptilian entered the cargo bay first, moving low and fast between containers. It stopped when it saw Roy standing in the open, completely exposed. The creature's tail lashed once in anticipation. Easy prey. Finally cornered with nowhere to run. The feline appeared on top of a container to Roy's left, its body pressed flat against the metal surface. It was ready to pounce from above while its companion attacked from ground level. A coordinated strike. These creatures were learning to work together. Roy finished his adjustments and stepped away from the control panel. He pulled the plasma cutter from his belt and held it loosely at his side. Both predators tensed, reading his body language. The prey was preparing to fight. Good. That was predictable. Then Roy did something neither creature expected. He turned his back on both of them and started walking toward the far exit. The reptilian launched forward with a roar that shook the cargo containers. Its claws tore into the metal floor as it accelerated. The feline leaped from its perch, angling to cut off Roy's escape. Both predators moved with the practiced efficiency of apex hunters closing on wounded prey. Roy reached the exit threshold and spun around. He raised his wrist display and pressed a single command. The cargo bay doors slammed shut behind him. The reptilian crashed into them a second too late, its momentum carrying it into the reinforced metal with bone-jarring force. The feline landed and whirled, suddenly trapped inside with its companion. Roy watched through the small window as both creatures realized what had happened. They were sealed inside. The feline threw itself against the door, claws screeching against the metal, but finding no purchase. The reptilian backed away and searched for another exit. There was none. All the ventilation shafts were too small, and the cargo loading doors were locked down. Roy tapped another command. The temperature inside the bay began to drop. Fast. Within 10 seconds, the air temperature had fallen 15 degrees. Within 30 seconds, it was below freezing. Frost began to form on the metal surfaces. The reptilian's movements became sluggish as its cold-blooded metabolism struggled to cope. It tried to generate warmth through movement, but the temperature kept dropping. The feline was better adapted to cold, but it was clearly uncomfortable. Its breath came out in visible clouds. The creature stopped trying to escape and instead moved to the warmest spot in the bay, near some machinery that generated residual heat. Roy watched the reptilian slow down even further. Its eyes were still alert, still intelligent, but its body was betraying it. The creature collapsed onto the floor, unable to maintain its weight on increasingly numb legs. It did not lose consciousness, but it was effectively neutralized that he stopped the temperature drop at -5 degrees. Cold enough to immobilize the reptilian without killing it. The feline watched its companion fall and then turned its large eyes toward the window where Roy stood. There was something different in that gaze now. Not fear exactly, but recognition. This small prey creature had just defeated a larger predator without using teeth or claws. It had used the environment itself as a weapon. Roy pulled out his communicator and finally got a signal. The upper levels must have restored some network functionality. He opened a channel to the station commander. This is Roy Chun in the lower maintenance section. I have both predators contained in Cargo Bay 7. There was a long silence. Then Vorthan's voice crackled through, disbelieving. Repeat that. You have what? Both Class A predators. Contained and neutralized. The reptilian is immobilized by cold. The feline is trapped, but mobile. How is that possible? We sent armed security teams, and they were all killed. Roy looked through the window at the feline predator. It was still watching him with those oversized eyes. Your teams try to fight them like prey fights back. All panic and desperation. I treated them like what they are. Intelligent hunters that can be outthought. Stay where you are. We are sending a containment team with heavy weapons. Negative. If you send armed troops down here, the feline will perceive it as an attack and respond accordingly. Let me handle this. Vorthan made a choking sound. You are a maintenance worker. You have no training for this. I have something better. I understand how predators think. Roy ended the communication before the commander could argue further. He opened the cargo bay door just wide enough to slip inside. The temperature was still well below freezing, and his breath fogged in the air. The reptilian lay motionless on the floor, watching him with cold hatred but unable to move. The feline backed away as Roy entered, its spines fully raised in a defensive display. Roy walked slowly toward the environmental controls inside the bay. He made no sudden movements and kept his body language neutral. The feline tracked him but did not attack. When he reached the panel, Roy began adjusting the temperature back up. Not quickly, but gradually. The reptilian would need time to recover without going into shock. The feline tilted its head, confused again. The prey had trapped them, disabled them, and now was helping them. Nothing in the creature's evolutionary history prepared it for this contradiction. Roy finished the temperature adjustment and turned to face the feline directly. They were 5 meters apart, close enough that the creature could cover the distance in a single leap. Close enough to be dangerous. Roy lowered himself into a crouch, making himself smaller and less threatening. He extended one hand slowly, palm up, in a gesture of non-aggression. The feline's spines lowered slightly. Its large eyes studied Roy's face, searching for intent. Predators understood body language better than words. They could read sincerity in posture and movement. Roy stayed perfectly still. He let the creature make the choice. Attack or accept. The feline took one step forward, then another. Its body remained tense, ready to spring away at the first sign of threat. But it was approaching him, curious now instead of hostile. When it got within 2 meters, Roy could see its nostrils flaring as it analyzed his scent. The creature's head lowered until it was level with his. Eyes locked on his face. They stayed like that for almost a minute. Human and alien predator, studying each other in silence. Finally, the feline sat back on its haunches. The spines along its back flattened completely. It was the first clear sign of relaxation Roy had seen from either creature. Behind them, the reptilian made a weak hissing sound as warmth returned to its body. Roy stood up slowly and backed toward the exit. The feline watched, but did not follow. As he reached the door, Roy looked back one more time. "I will figure this out," he said quietly. "I promise." The feline's ears twitched, the only acknowledgement that it had heard him. Roy sealed the cargo bay door and leaned against it, finally allowing himself to breathe. His hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. He had just stood within striking distance of 2 of the galaxy's most dangerous predators and walked away. The absurdity of it hit him all at once, and he laughed. It was a short, slightly manic sound that echoed in the empty corridor. His communicator buzzed. "Vorthan again. Chin, what is your status?" Both predators secured in Cargo Bay 7. Temperature is stabilizing. No casualties. The containment team is suiting up now. They will retrieve the creatures and return them to their cells. Roy pushed away from the door. "Commander, that is a bad idea. Those cells were not adequate the first time. What makes you think they will hold now? We have no choice. The research director wants them sedated and locked down immediately. Then the research director is an idiot." Roy regretted the words as soon as they left his mouth, but he was too tired to care about diplomacy. These are intelligent beings. They escaped because they were treated like animals in a zoo. You need a better approach. Vorthan's voice dropped to a dangerous tone. "You are overstepping, maintenance worker. Return to your station and let the professionals handle this." Roy opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Through the small window in the cargo bay door, he could see the feline predator pacing restlessly. It kept looking toward the door, toward where Roy had been standing. The reptilian had recovered enough to raise its head, though it still could not stand. His communicator crackled with a new voice. This one was smoother, more controlled. Chun, this is Dr. Althara, head of xenobiology research. I have been monitoring the security feeds. What you did was remarkable. I would very much like to speak with you. I am listening, not over comms. In person. Can you come to the observation deck above the cargo bay? I want to discuss something important. Roy checked his wrist display. The observation deck was accessible through a maintenance ladder about 20 meters down the corridor. Give me 5 minutes. He climbed the ladder with his tool bag slung over one shoulder, each rung bringing him higher into the station's infrastructure. The observation deck was a narrow platform with reinforced windows looking down into the cargo bay. Dr. Althara was waiting there, her forearms folded in a posture of deep thought. She was Corthan, a species known for their scientific brilliance and complete lack of emotional expression. Maintenance worker Roy Chun, she said without preamble. You have accomplished what 3 security teams and 2 containment specialists could not. Explain your methodology. Roy set down his tool bag and looked through the window. The feline was still pacing. I did not try to dominate them. I just showed them I was not prey. Elaborate. Those creatures are smart. They understand threat assessment and territory. Your security teams came at them with weapons and fear, which triggered their hunting response. I came at them with confidence and control. I used the environment to prove I was the more dangerous opponent without actually harming them. Dr. Althara's upper arms gestured in what might have been approval. Interesting. Most species respond to apex predators with either fear or aggression. Humans seem to have a third option. We have been dealing with predators for a long time. Lions, tigers, crocodiles, sharks. We learned that understanding them is more effective than just fighting them. Your Earth is a death world, then? Roy shrugged. We prefer to think of it as competitive. Dr. Althara made a sound like air escaping from a valve, which was how her species laughed. A diplomatic answer. But I digress. I asked you here because the station commander wants to destroy both predators. He believes they are too dangerous to keep alive. That is murder. Legally, they are classified as research specimens. The commander has the authority to terminate them if they pose a threat to station safety. However, I believe there's another option, one that requires your cooperation. Roy turned away from the window to face her directly. What kind of option? I want to establish a new containment protocol, one based on behavioral understanding rather than physical barriers. You would work as a handler, maintaining regular contact with both creatures and teaching us how to properly care for them. I am a maintenance worker, not an animal trainer. You are someone who survived 20 minutes alone with 2 apex predators and earned their respect. That makes you uniquely qualified. Dr. Althara's third arm gestured toward the window. Look at the feline. It has been watching that door since you left. It is waiting for you. Roy looked down into the cargo bay. She was right. The feline's attention was fixed on the door, its body language showing anticipation rather than aggression. The creature had formed some kind of connection with him during their encounter. What about the reptilian? He asked. More complicated. It views you as a rival predator, not a companion. But it also respects your dominance. With time, that respect could develop into cooperation. Roy considered the offer. It was insane. It was dangerous. It went against every reasonable instinct for self-preservation. And yet he found himself nodding. I will do it, but I have conditions. Name them. First, no more cages. Build them proper habitats with space to move and environmental enrichment. Second, I need full access to their behavioral profiles and medical history. Third, the commander does not get to override my decisions about their care. Dr. Althara's forearms spread wide in a gesture of agreement. Done. I will handle Vorthan. You handle the predators. A proximity alert flashed on Roy's wrist display. Something was wrong with the cargo bay door. He pulled up the security feed and felt his stomach drop. The feline was throwing itself against the door with increasing violence. The metal was starting to buckle under the repeated impacts. It wants out, Dr. Althara observed calmly. Roy was already moving toward the ladder. It wants me. There is a difference. He climbed down faster than was safe, his boots barely touching the rungs. When he reached the corridor, He could hear the creature's frustrated snarls from inside the bay. The door was holding, but not for much longer. Roy approached slowly and pressed his hand against the small window. The feline stopped mid-charge when it saw him. Its large eyes locked onto his face through the glass. The creature sat down heavily, its sides heaving with exertion. Roy could see scratch marks on the inside of the door where it had been trying to claw its way out. "Hey," Roy said softly, knowing the creature could not understand his words, but hoping his tone would carry meaning. "I'm still here. I did not abandon you." The feline pressed its face against the glass from the other side. Its breath fogged the window. Roy kept his hand on the glass, maintaining contact. After a moment, the creature's breathing slowed. The aggressive tension left its body. It was calm again, simply because he was there, behind the feline. The reptilian had managed to stand. It was watching the interaction with its cold, calculating eyes. Roy met its gaze through the window and nodded slowly, a gesture of acknowledgement between equals. The reptilian lowered its head slightly in response. Not submission, but recognition, Doctor. Alpha's voice came through his communicator. "Fascinating. You have established a bond with both creatures in less than an hour. This will revolutionize our approach to xenobiology." Roy did not respond. He was too focused on the two predators watching him from inside the bay. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered what his grandfather would think of this. The old man had taught him to respect predators, to understand them, but he had never mentioned becoming friends with them. Then again, his grandfather had never met aliens. 3 days had passed since the containment breach. Roy stood in the newly constructed habitat, watching as the feline explored its expanded territory. The space was 10 times larger than the old cell, with climbing structures, hiding spots, and environmental controls that mimicked its home world's jungle climate. The creature seemed more relaxed now, though it still followed Roy everywhere he went inside the habitat. Doctor. Althara had named the feline Nyxera, after a predator from her own world's mythology. Roy just called it Nyx. The creature responded to the shorter name with a flick of its ears, which he chose to interpret as approval. The reptilian was another story. It occupied a separate habitat built to withstand extreme temperature variations. Roy had been working with it every day, establishing boundaries and testing responses. The creature was slower to trust, but it had stopped displaying overt aggression. Dr. Althara called it Vorik. Roy called it stubborn. Today was important. The station commander had finally agreed to let Roy demonstrate his handling techniques to the research team. If the demonstration failed, both predators would be shipped to a maximum security facility on the other side of the galaxy. If it succeeded, Roy might actually have a chance to prove his approach was viable, that he exited Nyx's habitat and sealed the door behind him. The creature watched him leave with what looked like disappointment, its tail drooping slightly. Roy promised to return later and headed for Vorik's section. The reptilian was awake and alert when Roy entered. It tracked him with those cold eyes, head swiveling to follow his movement. Roy had learned to read its body language over the past few days. Tail position indicated mood. Scale color showed temperature regulation. The angle of its head revealed whether it was calculating an attack or simply observing. Right now, Vorik was in observation mode. Good. Roy approached slowly, carrying a container of fresh meat from the creature's preferred prey species. He had learned that while Vorik could hunt, it preferred to be fed. The act of providing food had become a ritual that established Roy as something other than prey or rival. He was a provider, which put him in a unique category the predator's brain struggled to process. That he placed the container on the ground and stepped back. Vorik moved forward with surprising speed for something so large. It grabbed the meat in its jaws and retreated to the far corner to eat. While it was distracted, Roy made subtle adjustments to the habitat's temperature controls. Slightly warmer today, to keep the creature comfortable and less aggressive. The observation gallery above the habitat was filling with people. Roy could see Vorthan's distinctive silhouette among the crowd, along with several members of the research team. Dr. Althara stood at the front, her 4 arms gesturing as she explained something to the others. That Roy's communicator buzzed. "Are you ready?" Dr. Althara asked. as ready as I will ever be. Remember, the goal is to demonstrate control without dominance. Show them you can interact safely with both predators. Got it. Roy waited until Vorik finished eating, then approached again. This time he carried nothing, just himself. The reptilian watched him come closer, its body tensing slightly. Roy stopped just outside, striking range, and lowered himself into a crouch. He had done this same routine every day for the past 3 days. Repetition built familiarity. Vorik stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, it lowered its head until it was level with Roy's. This was the closest thing to a greeting Roy had managed to achieve. It was not affection, but it was acknowledgement. In Vorik's world, that was significant. Roy stood up and walked to the habitat exit. He looked back at the reptilian and made a specific hand gesture he had been teaching it. Kulme. Vorik tilted its head, considering. Then it stood and walked toward him, not following exactly, but paralleling his path. Close enough, the observation gallery erupted in quiet conversation. Roy heard someone say it was impossible, that predators do not follow commands. He smiled grimly and exited into the connecting corridor that linked both habitats. Nyx was waiting at her habitat door when Roy arrived. The feline had learned his schedule and knew when to expect him. She made a chirping sound, which was apparently how her species expressed pleasure. Roy opened the door and Nyx immediately pressed against his leg, rubbing her shoulder along his side. It was a scent-marking behavior, claiming him as part of her territory. Yeah, good to see you too, Roy muttered, scratching behind her ears. Nyx's spines vibrated with contentment. The real test came next. Roy had proposed something that Dr. Althera thought was brilliant and Vorthan thought was suicidal. He was going to have both predators in the same space at the same time, with him standing between them. He led Nyx into the connecting corridor and opened the door to Vorik's habitat. The reptilian emerged slowly, its eyes immediately locking onto the feline. Nyx's spines raised defensively, and she let out a low warning growl. Both predators had been separated since the initial containment breach. Neither was sure how to react to the other's presence. Roy positioned himself directly between them. Nyx pressed closer to his left side. Vorik remained on his right, tail swishing with agitation. The tension in the corridor was thick enough to cut. Above them, the observation gallery had gone completely silent. Roy raised both hands slowly, palms out, in a calming gesture he had taught both creatures. Nyx responded first, her spines lowering slightly. Vorik took longer, but eventually its tail stilled. Both predators were watching Roy instead of each other. He started walking down the corridor. Nyx followed immediately, staying close to his side. Vorik hesitated, then began moving as well, maintaining a parallel position on Roy's other side. They looked like an unlikely pack, moving together through the station's lower levels. Roy led them to a large open area that had been cleared for the demonstration. It was basically a circular arena with reinforced walls and multiple exit points. The observation gallery curved around the top, giving everyone a clear view. Roy could see at least 30 people watching now, including several he recognized from station administration, that he stopped in the center of the arena. Both predators stopped with him, flanking him on either side. Roy turned to face the observation gallery. These creatures are not monsters, he called out, his voice carrying in the enclosed space. They are intelligent, adaptable, and capable of learning. The problem was never them. The problem was how he treated them. Vorthan's voice boomed from a speaker. They killed 3 security officers because your security officers came at them like prey, panicked and aggressive. These predators responded the only way they knew how. And you think you can control them? Roy shook his head. I do not control them. I communicate with them. There is a difference. To demonstrate. He made the hand gesture for sit. Nyx sat immediately, her large eyes focused on him. Vorik took longer, processing the command through its colder logic, but eventually it lowered its body into a resting position. Both predators remained calm, even though they were in an unfamiliar space with strange scents and sounds. Roy walked to the edge of the arena, leaving both creatures in the center. They watched him go, but did not follow. He made another gesture. Stay. Both remained motionless. He turned to the observation gallery again. This is what understanding looks like. Not cages, not weapons, just respect and consistency. Dr. Althera's voice came through the speaker, excited. How long did this training take? 3 days of regular interaction. But the foundation was built in the first 20 minutes, when I showed them I was not prey. Vorthan made a dismissive sound. This proves nothing. They're calm now, but what happens when their hunting instincts activate? Roy had expected this question. He pulled a small device from his pocket, something he had prepared specifically for this moment. It was a mechanical rat, programmed to move erratically and emit high-frequency sounds. Prey behavior, he activated it and tossed it into the arena. Both predators' heads snapped toward the movement. Nyx's pupils dilated. Vorik's body tensed. Their hunting instincts were fully activated. The mechanical rat scurried across the floor, making the exact sounds that would trigger a chase response. Neither predator moved. Roy called out to them. Hunt! Nyx exploded into motion, crossing the arena in 3 powerful bounds. She caught the mechanical rat mid-stride and crushed it between her jaws. Vorik watched with what might have been approval, then turned its attention back to Roy. The reptilian had no interest in small prey. It was waiting for a real challenge. Roy made the gesture for return. Nyx trotted back to him and dropped the broken rat at his feet, looking pleased with herself. He scratched her ears in reward. The observation gallery remained silent for several seconds after the demonstration. Roy could see people leaning forward, trying to process what they had just witnessed. A human standing between 2 apex predators, commanding their behavior like they were trained animals. Except they were not animals. They were intelligent beings who had chosen to cooperate. Vorthan finally spoke, his voice less hostile than before. I will admit, this is unexpected. But one demonstration does not prove long-term viability. What happens if you are not here? What if someone else needs to interact with them? Then we train others using the same methods. It is not complicated. Consistency, respect, and understanding predator psychology. Dr. Althera's 4 arms gestured enthusiastically. I volunteer to be trained. This could revolutionize how we approach all dangerous species research. Other voices chimed in from the gallery, researchers and handlers expressing interest. Roy felt a small surge of relief. They were starting to understand. These creatures did not need to be feared or destroyed. They needed to be respected. A new voice cut through the conversation. Impressive work, human. Roy turned toward the source. A figure had entered the arena through one of the side doors, moving with the confident stride of someone accustomed to authority. It was a Threll, a species known for their military prowess and direct approach to problem-solving. This particular Threll wore the insignia of a Galactic Council observer. I am Commander Sereth. I was sent to evaluate this situation and determine whether the predators should be destroyed or relocated to a secure facility. Your demonstration has given me much to consider. Roy kept his expression neutral. They do not need to be relocated. They need proper care. Perhaps. But there is another issue to address. Sereth stopped a few meters away, his eyes moving between Roy and the 2 predators. Humans are classified as a Category 2 species. Low aggression, moderate intelligence, no significant threat to galactic stability. Yet you have done something no Category 2 species should be capable of. You have dominated 2 Category 5 predators. I did not dominate them. I communicated. The result is the same. You have control. Sereth's expression was unreadable. This raises questions about human classification. Perhaps Earth deserved a second look. Dr. Althera interjected from the gallery. Commander Sereth, with respect, what Roy accomplished is not about dominance. It is about understanding. Humans evolved on a death world alongside numerous apex predators. They learned to coexist through intelligence rather than physical strength. A death world. Sereth's tone carried surprise. Earth is classified as a garden world in our databases. Your databases are incomplete, Roy said quietly. Earth has lions, bears, crocodiles, sharks, venomous snakes, and hundreds of other species that can kill humans easily. We survive by being smarter, not stronger. Sareth studied him for a long moment. Interesting. Very interesting indeed. Nix chose that moment to press against Roy's leg, clearly bored with all the talking. Vorik shifted its weight, also showing signs of restlessness. Roy made the gesture for rest, and both predators settled into more relaxed postures. The casual ease of the interaction was not lost on Sareth. "I will file a report recommending the predators remain here under your care," Sareth said. "I will also recommend a formal review of Earth classification. The Galactic Council should know what humans are truly capable of." "We're just people trying to get by," Roy replied. "Nothing special. You befriended 2 creatures that killed trained soldiers. I would call that special." After Sareth left, the observation gallery slowly emptied. Vorthen approached Roy privately, his posture less rigid than usual. "I was wrong about you, maintenance worker. What you have done here is remarkable. I just did what made sense." "No, you did what no one else thought to try. There is a difference." Vorthen paused, his mandibles clicking in thought. "The station director wants to offer you a permanent position as head of dangerous species management. Significant pay increase and full research support." Roy looked down at Nix, who was now lying across his feet, effectively pinning him in place. Vorik had moved closer as well, settling into a resting position nearby. Both predators were completely relaxed, treating him as part of their environment rather than a threat or prey. "I accept on one condition." "Name it." "No more cages. If we bring in dangerous species, we do it right from the start. Proper habitats, behavioral assessment, and trained handlers who understand predator psychology." "Agreed. I will have the contracts prepared." Over the next few weeks, Roy settled into his new role. The station built additional habitats for future research subjects, all designed with his input. Dr. Althera became his primary collaborator, documenting every interaction and developing training protocols for other handlers. Several researchers volunteered to work with the predators, learning the techniques Roy had developed. Nix became something of a station mascot, though only Roy and a select few handlers were allowed direct contact. The feline enjoyed the attention, often performing tricks through the habitat windows for visitors. She had developed a genuine affection for Roy that went beyond simple conditioning. When he entered her habitat, she would greet him with chirps and gentle headbutts, behaviors she showed no one else. Vorik remained more aloof, but even the reptilian showed subtle signs of attachment. It would position itself near the habitat entrance when Roy's scheduled visit time approached. Once, when Roy was delayed by maintenance work, Vorik had paced restlessly for over an hour until he finally arrived. The predator's relief was obvious in the way its scales shifted to a calmer color pattern. Roy also began working with newly arrived specimens, applying his methods to other dangerous species. A pack of wolf-like hunters from an ice world. A solitary ambush predator that hunted by sound. Each species presented unique challenges, but the fundamental approach remained the same. Understand their nature, respect their abilities, and communicate on their terms. The Galactic Council's review of Earth's classification took 6 months. When the results came through, Roy was called into a formal meeting with council representatives. They informed him that Earth was being reclassified as a Category 4 death world, with humans upgraded to Category 3 intelligent species. The implications were significant. Earth would receive more representation in galactic affairs, and humans would be taken more seriously in scientific and diplomatic circles. Roy found the whole thing amusing, all because he had refused to panic when faced with 2 predators that a year after the initial containment breach. Roy stood in the central habitat commons, watching as Nix and Vorik interacted peacefully in a shared space. It had taken months of careful introduction, but they had eventually accepted each other's presence. Not as friends exactly, but as pack members with defined roles. Nix was the quick responder, alert and playful. Vorik was the heavy muscle, calm and calculating. And Roy was the bridge between them, the unexpected element that made it all work. Dr. Althera joined him at the observation window. "You have achieved something remarkable here. 5 different predator species, all thriving under human care protocols. The scientific community is calling it the Chun method." Roy shrugged. "It is not really a method. It is just common sense. Perhaps. But common sense is surprisingly uncommon when dealing with fear. She gestured toward Nyx and Vorik. They trust you completely. Do you know what that means? That I feed them regularly? That you represent something new in their experience? A creature that is neither prey nor predator, but something else. A companion. Roy watched Nyx roll on her back, playing with the enrichment toy he had designed. Vorik observed from a resting position nearby, its tail swishing in what Roy had learned to interpret as contentment. Both creatures were healthy, engaged, and exhibiting natural behaviors in a safe environment. That was what mattered. His communicator buzzed. Another ship had arrived with a new specimen, something classified as extremely dangerous. The crew was afraid to even open the containment pod. They were requesting Roy's presence immediately, but he sighed and turned away from the window. Duty calls. Will you be careful? Dr. Althra asked. Always am. As Roy headed for the docking bay, Nyx noticed him leaving through the habitat window. She pressed against the glass and chirped, a sound of goodbye and promise. Roy pressed his hand against the glass from the other side, maintaining contact for a brief moment. I will be back, he promised. The feline's ears twisted.